My parents gave my apartment to my sister after her divorce, claiming she was going through a tough time. They also told me I was young and could always find somewhere else, so I went straight to the police. It was the second week when I stood in the hallway of my new apartment building staring at the lock that had rejected my key 3 times already. The fourth attempt produced the same result. My hands shook as I pulled out my phone and called my mother. I didn't know why I called her, but I guessed I was right. "Honey, I'm so glad you called," she answered, her voice bright and cheerful. "I was going to tell you earlier, but things got so busy with helping Emily settle in." The words didn't register immediately. My brain struggled to process what she just said while I stood in front of a door that was supposed to open for me. "What are you talking about?" "Settle in where your apartment, sweetie." Emily needed somewhere to stay after the divorce papers were filed. You know how difficult Travis has been making everything for her? She's absolutely devastated, and we couldn't just let her stay in that big empty house while he got to keep living there comfortably. "You're only 24. You can find another place easily." The air felt thick in my lungs. I'd spent the last 3 months working overtime at the dental office where I worked as a hygienist, saving every possible dollar while simultaneously renovating this apartment. The place had been a disaster when I'd signed the lease, which is why the rent was affordable. I'd scraped wallpaper, painted every wall, replaced broken fixtures, and spent my weekends hauling trash bags full of construction debris down 4 flights of stairs because the elevator was always broken. "Mom, this is my apartment. My name is on the lease. How did Emily even get inside?" "Well, we still have your spare key from when you asked us to water your plants that weekend. You went to visit Ashley in Denver. Emily really needed this." "Megan. She's your sister. Family helps family." My sister Emily had spent the last 2 years mocking every decision I'd made. When I told her I was looking for an apartment, she'd laugh and said I'd never afford anything decent on my salary. When I found this place, she'd driven over, walked through the door, wrinkled her nose, and asked if I was planning to live in a condemned building. At Christmas dinner, she'd announced to everyone that I was wasting my money on a place that would never be worth the investment. "I'm coming over there right now," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "Megan, don't make this difficult. Emily has enough stress in her life. You can stay with us until you find something new. Your old room is exactly how you left it." I hung up without responding. My old room was currently being used as my father's home office. But that wasn't the point. The point was that my apartment, the first place I'd ever owned independently, had been given away like a hand-me-down sweater. I walked the 6 blocks to the police station. The evening air felt cold against my face, and I welcomed the sensation. It kept me focused. The station smelled like burnt coffee and cleaning solution. An officer sat behind a desk looking up as I approached. "I need to report a breaking and entering," I said, pulling my lease from my purse. "Someone changed the locks on my apartment without my permission." Officer Janet Reeves took down my information with practiced efficiency. She reviewed my lease, checked my identification, and made several phone calls. Within an hour, 2 officers accompanied me back to my building. One of them knocked on the door while I stood slightly behind them. Emily answered, wearing one of my robes. Her eyes widened when she saw the police officers, then narrowed when she spotted me. "Megan, what is this? Did you seriously call the cops on your own sister, ma'am? Do you have documentation proving you have legal right to occupy this residence?" Officer Reeves asked. "My family helped me move in. My sister said I could stay here while I deal with my divorce." I said no such thing. I interrupted. "I didn't even know you were here until 30 minutes ago, when my keys stopped working." Officer Reeves asked Emily to step aside. The apartment looked different already. My carefully arranged furniture had been moved. Emily's belongings were scattered across surfaces I'd spent hours cleaning and organizing. The kitchen counter held takeout containers and dirty dishes. A wine stain marked the coffee table I'd refinished by hand. "Ma'am, you're going to need to gather your belongings and vacate the premises," Officer Reeves said to Emily. "The lease is solely in Miss Megan Foster's name. You have no legal right to be here, and changing the locks constitutes an illegal eviction." "This is ridiculous. We're a family. Tell them Megan. Tell them you're just being petty because you've always been jealous of me." I looked at my sister, really looked at her. Emily was 31 years old. She'd married Travis right out of college and had spent the following years living in a house his parents had helped them buy, driving a car his family business had provided, and working part-time at a job she complained about constantly but never quit. She built her entire life on the assumption that things would simply be given to her. Officer, I want to press charges for breaking and entering and illegal eviction. Emily's face went pale. You can't be serious. You broke into my home, changed my locks, and moved into a space you have no legal claim to. Yes, I'm serious. My phone rang. Mom's name flashed across the screen. I answered on speaker. Megan Rose Foster. The police just called your father. What have you done? Emily is crying. She says you're trying to have her arrested. How could you be so cruel? Mom, Emily committed a crime. Multiple crimes, actually. She broke into my apartment and illegally evicted me from my own home. She's family. She needed help. Then you should have offered her your home, not mine. I spent 3 months renovating this place. I invested my own money, my own time, and my own physical labor into making it livable. Emily called it a condemned building. Now suddenly it's nice enough for her to steal. We didn't steal anything. We were helping. Helping would have been asking. This was taking. There's a difference, and I'm done pretending there isn't. I hung up. Emily was packing her suitcases with sharp, angry movements. She threw clothes into bags without folding them, muttering under her breath about ungrateful sisters and family betrayal. Officer Reeves stood nearby, documenting everything with her body camera. I'll need a locksmith to come change these locks back, I said. Can I get documentation of this from my landlord? Officer Reeves nodded. We'll provide you with a full incident report. I'd also recommend documenting any damage to the property for potential civil claims. I pulled out my phone and started taking photographs. The wine stained the scratched hardwood floors where Emily had dragged furniture, a crack in the bathroom mirror, a burn mark on the counter near the stove. Each photo felt like evidence of something larger than property damage. Emily finished packing around 10 o'clock. She stood at the door with 3 suitcases and a look of absolute fury on her face. Mom and Dad are never going to forgive you for this. Maybe not, I said. But I'll forgive myself, which matters more. The locksmith arrived 20 minutes after Emily left. He was an older man named Roger who'd seen everything in his 40 years of working in the city. He changed the locks efficiently while I cleaned the kitchen, scrubbing away the evidence of my sister's brief occupation. Family dispute, he asked as he tested the new keys. Something like that. Seen it before. People think family means free access to everything, property, money, time. They forget that boundaries matter everywhere, especially with the people closest to us. I paid him in cash and locked the door behind him. The apartment felt different now, like a space I'd had to reclaim rather than simply inhabit. I spent the next 2 hours cleaning, documenting damage, and making a list of everything that would need to be repaired or replaced. My phone buzzed constantly. Messages from my mother, my father, my Aunt Patricia, and several family friends poured in. Each one carried the same basic message with slight variations. I was being selfish. Emily was suffering. Family supported each other unconditionally. I was making a difficult situation worse. I responded to exactly none of them. 3 days later, I filed a civil suit against Emily for the cost of repairs, the locksmith fee, and the emotional distress of being illegally evicted from my own home. My attorney, Lawrence Meadows, was a friend of a friend who specialized in landlord-tenant disputes and property law. This is pretty straightforward, he said, reviewing the police report and my documentation. Your sister committed illegal eviction, which is a serious offense. The fact that she changed the locks shows premeditation. She knew what she was doing was wrong, or she would have asked permission first. My family thinks I'm overreacting. Your family isn't paying your rent or your legal fees. They also aren't the ones who spent 3 months fixing up that apartment, only to have someone break in and take it over. You're not overreacting. You're protecting yourself. The preliminary hearing happened 2 weeks later. Emily showed up with our parents. My mother wore her disappointed face, the one she perfected when I was 16 and came home past curfew. My father looked uncomfortable, like he'd rather be anywhere else. Emily's attorney tried to argue that the situation was a family misunderstanding, that Emily had believed she had permission to stay in the apartment based on conversations with our mother. Lawrence methodically destroyed that argument by presenting my phone records showing I'd had no contact with Emily for 3 weeks prior to the incident, and presenting testimony from my landlord confirming that only I had ever been authorized to occupy the unit. The judge ruled in my favor, ordering Emily to pay for all repairs, the locksmith, my legal fees, and an additional amount for the illegal eviction. The total came to just over $8,000. My mother cornered me in the courthouse hallway afterward. I hope you're proud of yourself. Your sister has to pay money she doesn't have because you couldn't be flexible for once in your life. Mom, she broke into my apartment. She changed my locks. She moved in without asking. If a stranger had done that, would you be defending them? A stranger isn't family. That's exactly my point. Family should treat each other better than strangers, not worse. Emily thought she could take my home because we share DNA. That's not love. That's entitlement. I walked away before she could respond. My father caught up with me at the elevator. He stood silently for a moment, his hands in his pockets, looking older than I remembered. Your mother means well, he finally said. Meaning well doesn't excuse bad behavior. You taught me that when I was 8 years old and broke Sarah Mitchell's toy because I wanted to play with it. You made me apologize, buy her a new one with my allowance money, and write an essay about respecting other people's property. Why doesn't Emily have to follow the same rules? He sighed. It's complicated. It really isn't. Either we all follow the same rules or the rules don't mean anything. The elevator arrived. I stepped inside and watched my father's face disappear as the doors closed. I felt hollow, like someone had scooped out my insides and left only the shell behind. The next morning, I woke up to 17 missed calls. Most were from my mother, but a few came from relatives I hadn't spoken to in years. My Aunt Patricia had left a voicemail that started with heavy breathing and escalated into a rant about how I'd ruined Emily's chances of getting back on her feet. My cousin Bridget sent a text saying she'd always thought I was the nice sister, followed by 3 disappointed face emojis. I made coffee and ignored all of it. The apartment felt quieter than usual, as if the walls themselves were absorbing the weight of what had happened. Sunlight streamed through the windows I'd spent an entire Saturday cleaning, hitting the floors at an angle that made the wood grain visible. These were the same floors Emily had scuffed with her careless furniture dragging. My phone rang again. This time, it was my childhood friend Ashley calling from Denver. I just got the weirdest message from your mom on Facebook, she said without preamble. Something about you refusing to help Emily and being vindictive. What's going on? I told her everything. The key that wouldn't turn, the police station, the lawsuit. Ashley listened without interrupting, which was one of the many reasons we'd stayed friends since 4th grade. Your family is insane, she said when I finished, like genuinely unhinged. Who gives away someone's apartment? Apparently mine does. Do you need to get out of there for a few days? You could fly out here. My couch is surprisingly comfortable and Denver is lovely this time of year. Plus, I make excellent stress-eating snacks. The offer was tempting, but running away felt like admitting defeat. I appreciate it, but I need to stay here. This is my home. I'm not letting them chase me out of it twice. That's fair, but seriously, if you change your mind, my door is open. Also, your mom is delusional if she thinks I'm going to take her side on this. I'm blocking her after we hang up. After the call ended, I sat on my couch and stared at the ceiling. The previous tenant had left behind a water stain shaped vaguely like Ohio on the ceiling. I'd planned to paint over it during the renovation, but the landlord had mentioned he was planning to resurface all the ceilings in the building that summer, so I'd left it alone rather than waste paint on something that would be redone anyway. I'd grown oddly fond of its presence in the meantime. It reminded me that imperfection could be interesting. The doorbell rang around noon. I checked the peephole and saw my Aunt Patricia standing in the hallway, arms crossed over her chest. She looked exactly like my mother, but with shorter hair and a perpetually skeptical expression. I opened the door but didn't invite her in. We need to talk, Patricia said. I don't think we do. Megan, this situation has gotten completely out of hand. Your mother is beside herself. Your father hasn't slept properly in days. Emily is devastated. All because you couldn't be flexible for a few months. Aunt Patricia, if someone broke into your house, changed your locks, and moved into your bedroom, would you be flexible about it? That's different. Emily is family. So you keep saying, but nobody has explained why being family means she gets to commit crimes without consequences. Patricia's face reddened. Crimes? You're talking about your sister like she's some kind of criminal. She made a mistake. She was going through a difficult time and made a poor decision. That doesn't make her a criminal. She broke into my apartment, changed my locks, and moved in without permission. Those are literal crimes. Breaking and entering. Illegal eviction. The police didn't make that up. The law didn't invent those charges because I was being petty. You could have handled this privately. Instead, you humiliated her in court. You made her pay thousands of dollars she doesn't have. You've turned this family against each other. I leaned against the doorframe, suddenly exhausted. I didn't turn anyone against anyone. I protected my home. Emily made choices. Mom and Dad enabled those choices. You're all angry at me because I refused to be a victim quietly. But that's not my responsibility. My responsibility is to myself. Patricia stared at me for a long moment. You changed. You used to be so sweet. I used to be so quiet. There's a difference. She left without another word. I closed the door and locked it, then checked that the deadbolt was secure. The new locks felt sturdier than the old ones. Roger the locksmith had installed commercial-grade hardware, the kind that couldn't be picked easily or bumped open with basic tools. That afternoon, I went back through the apartment and documented everything again. I had already taken photos the night of the incident, but Lawrence Meadows had suggested creating a comprehensive record of all damages organized chronologically with detailed descriptions. The wine stain on the coffee table measured approximately 6 inches in diameter. I tried cleaning it with wood polish, but the liquid had soaked into the unfinished underside before I'd sealed it. The table had been a curb find I'd lovingly restored over 3 weekends, sanding away years of neglect and applying 4 coats of polyurethane. Emily had destroyed that work in however many minutes it took her to spill a glass and not clean it up. The scratches on the hardwood floor told their own story. They ran in straight lines from the wall to the center of the living room, suggesting Emily had dragged something heavy without using furniture pads. I'd been meticulous about protecting these floors. Every piece of furniture sat on felt pads. I removed my shoes at the door. I swept daily and mopped weekly with a pH-neutral cleaner specifically formulated for hardwood. The bathroom mirror crack spiderwebbed from a central impact point near the top right corner. Something had hit it with force. I couldn't imagine what, and I didn't particularly want to know. I measured everything, wrote detailed descriptions, and attached timestamps to each photo. The process felt mechanical and distant, like I was documenting someone else's tragedy rather than my own. My phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. I almost deleted it without reading, but curiosity won. This is Travis. Got your number from the old family contact list Emily and I shared. Just wanted to check in. Emily's been posting some stuff on social media about you. Thought you should know. She's painting herself as the victim and you as some kind of monster who kicked her out on the street. People who don't know the full story are believing her. Might want to protect yourself. Good luck with everything. I thanked him for the heads up and immediately checked Emily's public Facebook page. Sure enough, she'd posted a long, rambling status about family betrayal, cruel sisters, and being homeless during the hardest time of her life. The post had 63 likes and 47 comments, most of them from people I'd never met, expressing sympathy and outrage. One comment from a woman named Bethany Reed said she couldn't believe my own sister would do this to me and asked where I was staying, that I couldn't let Emily have one bedroom, adding that family is supposed to support each other no matter what. Another from someone called Mark said this was what's wrong with young people today. No compassion and no understanding of what sacrifice means. My first instinct was to respond to correct the record to explain that Emily had broken into my apartment. But Lawrence Meadows had been clear during our initial consultation. Don't engage with Emily or her supporters on social media. Anything I said could be used against me if the situation escalated further. Instead, I screenshotted everything. Every post, every comment, every share. I created a folder on my laptop, labeled documentation, and saved it all with dates and timestamps. If Emily wanted to wage a public relations war, I'd be ready with evidence. Work became my refuge. The dental office where I worked was busy enough to keep my mind occupied during the day. My colleague Jennifer noticed something was wrong but didn't push when I said I didn't want to talk about it. Instead, she brought me coffee and forwarded funny videos during our lunch breaks. Emily paid the judgment in installments over 6 months. Each payment arrived with no note, no apology, just a check with her signature. I deposited them and used the money to repair the damage she'd caused. The wine stain required professional cleaning. The hardwood floor needed refinishing in 3 places. The bathroom mirror had to be replaced entirely. During those 6 months, my life took on a strange new rhythm. I'd wake up, go to work, come home, and exist in a space that felt simultaneously mine and contested. Every time I unlocked the door, I felt a small rush of relief that the key still worked, that nobody had invaded again. Jennifer noticed the change in me. One afternoon during lunch, she set down her sandwich and looked at me directly. "You've been different lately, quieter. You used to talk about weekend projects and new recipes you wanted to try. Now you just sort of exist." "I'm fine," I said automatically. "You're surviving. That's not the same thing as fine." She was right, though I didn't want to admit it. The apartment that had once felt like a triumph now felt like a fortress I had to defend constantly. I'd installed a security camera above my door, started keeping copies of my lease in multiple locations, and found myself checking that the locks were secure multiple times before bed. The second payment from Emily arrived with something extra. A letter from my mother slipped inside the envelope. I recognized her handwriting before I even opened it. The letter was 3 pages long, written on her monogram stationery in the careful cursive she'd learned in Catholic school. It began with Bible verses about forgiveness and family unity. It moved into detailed descriptions of how much Emily was suffering, how the divorce had devastated her, how she'd lost weight and couldn't sleep. It ended with a plea for me to drop the remaining payments and let this family heal. I read it twice, then filed it with the other documentation. No response felt adequate, so I sent none. The third month brought an unexpected visitor. I came home from work to find Travis sitting on the floor outside my apartment door, his back against the wall, scrolling through his phone. "I tried calling," he said, standing up. "Hope it's okay that I just showed up. Is everything all right?" "Define all right. Emily's been calling me constantly. She wants me to talk to you, convince you to drop the lawsuit, maybe even let her move back in. She seems to think I have some kind of influence over you. We've spoken exactly once since your divorce proceedings started. I told her that she didn't care. In her mind, you're being unreasonable and someone just needs to explain things to you correctly and you'll suddenly see the light." He rubbed his face tiredly. "I spent 7 years living without logic. It never gets less exhausting." I unlocked the apartment and invited him in. He looked around with obvious interest, taking in the renovations, the carefully chosen furniture, the plants on the windowsill. "This is really nice," he said. "Emily showed me photos of what it looked like before you moved in. You did all this yourself. Most of it. I hired someone for the electrical work because I'm not trying to burn the building down. Everything else was just time and YouTube tutorials. She told everyone you'd picked this place despite her that you deliberately chose something run down so you could make her look bad for having a nicer house. The statement was so absurd I almost laughed. I picked this place because it was what I could afford. The renovation was necessary because the previous tenant had basically destroyed it. Making Emily look bad never entered my mind because, shockingly, not everything I do is about her." Travis sat on the couch, the same one Emily had probably sat on during her brief occupation. I believed her for a long time. Whenever she'd complain about you being jealous or competitive, I'd nod along because that's what you do when you're married. You support your spouse. But looking back, I can't think of a single time you actually did anything to her. She just interpreted your existence as an attack. Why are you telling me this? Because I want you to know you're not crazy. When everyone in your family is telling you you're wrong, it's easy to start believing them. But you're not wrong. What Emily did was illegal and selfish. You responding appropriately doesn't make you the villain, no matter how hard she tries to paint it that way. He paused, looking uncomfortable. Also, the divorce is moving forward. Should be final in about 3 months. Emily keeps asking me to intervene with you, and I wanted you to know I'm not going to do that. What happened between you two is between you two. After he left, I sat in the growing darkness of my apartment and thought about validation. How much of the past few months had I spent questioning my own judgment, wondering if maybe I was being too harsh, too unforgiving, too rigid? Travis's words didn't erase those doubts entirely, but they helped quiet them. The fourth payment came with another letter, this one from my father. His handwriting was messier than my mother's, slanting heavily to the right, as if the words were trying to escape the page. He wrote about family dinners I was missing, about how my mother cried every Sunday when she set the table, and realized I wouldn't be there, about Emily's struggles to find a new apartment with an eviction on her record, about how hard it was to watch both his daughters suffer over something that could be resolved with a simple conversation. I wanted to write back and explain that there was nothing simple about this conversation, that the issue wasn't one apartment or one incident, but a lifetime of patterns I'd finally stopped accepting. But my father had always preferred surface-level peace to uncomfortable truth. A letter wouldn't change that. The dental office where I worked became my safe haven. Dr. Patricia Hammond, the dentist who owned the practice, was a no-nonsense woman in her 50s who built her business from nothing. She'd overheard me on the phone with Lawrence Meadows one afternoon and had pulled me aside after my last appointment of the day. Family drama, she'd asked. Something like that. I sued my brother 15 years ago over a business deal gone wrong. My parents didn't speak to me for 3 years. They came around eventually, but those 3 years were rough. Just want you to know you're not alone in this experience. Sometimes protecting yourself means accepting that other people won't understand. Her words stayed with me. The idea that maybe my family would come around eventually provided a small, fragile hope I wasn't sure I wanted to rely on. The coffee table had been one of my early projects, something I tackled the summer before I even found the apartment. I'd spotted it on a curb, recognizing good bones beneath the damage, and had spent 3 weekends in my parents' garage restoring it. When I finally moved into the apartment, it had been one of the first pieces of furniture I brought in a symbol of what patient work could accomplish. Jennifer started inviting me to more social events. Game nights at her place, dinner with her boyfriend and his friends, a hiking trip that left me sore for 3 days. She never pushed me to talk about the situation, but her consistent presence reminded me that chosen family could matter as much as biological family. During one of these game nights, a woman named Tessa asked what I did for fun. I realized I didn't have a good answer. The apartment renovation had consumed my free time for months. Before that, I'd spent weekends visiting my parents or attending family functions. My hobbies and interests had gotten lost somewhere in the process of maintaining relationships that apparently only went one direction. I used to paint, I said slowly. Watercolors mostly, landscapes, and still life compositions. I haven't picked up a brush in probably 2 years. Why did you stop? I'm not sure. Life got busy. I guess other things seemed more important. That conversation stayed with me. The next day, I went to an art supply store and bought a basic watercolor set, brushes, and paper. It felt indulgent and slightly foolish spending money on something that wasn't strictly necessary. But that evening, I sat at my kitchen table and painted the view from my window. The painting was mediocre at best. My technique had gotten rusty, and I'd forgotten how to properly control water to pigment ratios. But the process of creating something of focusing on brushstrokes and color mixing instead of family drama and legal proceedings felt like remembering how to breathe properly. I started painting regularly. After that, small studies of objects around my apartment, abstract color compositions, attempts at portraiture that looked more like melted wax figures than actual humans. Each painting got slightly better, and more importantly, each session reminded me that I was more than this conflict. My parents stopped calling after the initial weeks following the court judgment. My mother sent a birthday card in September with a generic message and no invitation to dinner. Emily blocked me on all social media platforms. Extended family members who had known me since childhood suddenly seemed unable to recognize me at the grocery store. The isolation felt like standing in a snowstorm, cold, disorienting, and endless. My birthday came and went with unusual quietness. 25 years old and celebrating alone in my apartment with takeout Chinese food and a movie I'd already seen 3 times. Jennifer had offered to throw me a party, but the idea of celebrating felt premature. I was still in survival mode, not yet ready for anything resembling joy. The fortune cookie for my dinner contained a slip of paper that read, "The path to peace requires walking through conflict." I taped it to my refrigerator next to a shopping list and a reminder about my upcoming dentist appointment. October brought the final payment from Emily. This time there was no letter from either parent, just the check signed in Emily's looping handwriting, the amount written precisely in the center of the appropriate line. I deposited it and scheduled the last of the repair work. The professional floor refinisher was a man named Carl, who'd been working with wood for 40 years. He assessed the damage with the careful attention of someone who genuinely cared about his craft. "Whoever did this wasn't being careful," he said, running his hand over the scratches. "These gouges are deep. Whatever they dragged must have weighed a lot, and they definitely weren't using any protective pads." My sister moved some furniture around. Carl nodded knowingly. Family helping with moves is usually when the worst damage happens. They mean well, but they don't think about consequences. He spent 2 days refinishing the affected areas, matching the stain and finish so precisely that I couldn't tell where the damage had been unless I looked at my photos. When he finished, the floors gleamed like they had when I'd first installed them. Good as new, Carl said, packing up his equipment. Better, actually. The original finish was already showing wear. Now you've got a fresh protective layer. After he left, I walked around the apartment in my socks, feeling the smooth wood under my feet. Everything was fixed now. The wine stain gone, the mirror, replaced, the floors refinished. Physically, the apartment showed no evidence of Emily's invasion, but I still felt the impact in ways that had nothing to do with property damage. November arrived with the first real cold snap of the season. I bought a space heater for the bedroom because the building's radiators were temperamental at best. The super, a perpetually tired man named Sam, promised he'd fix them, but never seemed to find the time. Thanksgiving approached with its inevitable complications. My mother called 2 weeks before the holiday, her voice careful and measured. "We're having dinner at 3 o'clock, she said. "Emily will be there. Your father and I think it's time everyone sat down together and moved past this unpleasantness." Unpleasantness. Yes, this situation has gone on long enough. We're family. Families forgive. Has Emily apologized? Silence stretched between us. She's been through a lot, Megan. Losing her marriage, having to find a new place to live, dealing with all this legal trouble you put her through. I think she deserves some grace. Mom, she broke into my apartment and illegally evicted me. She caused thousands of dollars in damage. She hasn't once acknowledged what she did was wrong. And you want me to show up for turkey and pretend none of that happened? I want you to act like an adult and put family first. I am putting family first. I'm putting myself first, which is something this family has never let me do without punishment. I hung up before she could respond. My hands were shaking and I felt nauseated. Standing up to my mother had never gotten easier, no matter how many times I did it. Jennifer invited me to her family's Thanksgiving when I mentioned I'd be spending it alone. My mom always makes way too much food and my relatives are mostly harmless. Plus, my little nephew is at that age where everything he says is accidentally hilarious. I accepted gratefully. Her family welcomed me without asking invasive questions. Her mother, Susan, simply said she was glad I could join them. Her nephew, a 5-year-old named Caleb, spent most of dinner explaining the complex political dynamics of his kindergarten class. Brandon thinks he's the boss because he's the tallest, but Emma is actually in charge because she knows where the teacher keeps the good stickers, Caleb explained seriously. It's a whole thing. I laughed for the first time in weeks. Real laughter, the kind that came from genuine amusement rather than polite social obligation. Jennifer caught my eye across the table and smiled. On the drive home, I thought about chosen family versus biological family. Susan had treated me with more warmth in one evening than my own mother had shown in months. Caleb had shared his carefully hoarded Halloween candy with me, declaring that I seemed nice enough to deserve the good chocolate. These strangers had made space for me without demanding I earn it through suffering or submission. December arrived with holiday decorations appearing throughout the city. My building super-hung tired-looking garland in the lobby that drooped sadly between the mailboxes. I bought a small artificial tree for my apartment. Nothing elaborate, just something to mark the season. Decorating it alone felt melancholic. I remembered childhood Christmases with Emily back when we'd been allies instead of adversaries. She'd been the one who taught me how to string popcorn garland. I'd been the one who could reach the high branches to hang ornaments. We'd worked together, argued over tinsel placement, and ultimately created something we were both proud of. When had that partnership dissolved, I couldn't pinpoint an exact moment. It had been gradual, like erosion. Small comments that diminished my achievements, subtle competitions I hadn't realized I was participating in, comparisons that always positioned me as lesser, younger, not quite enough. Maybe it had started when I'd gotten into my first choice college and she'd seemed irritated rather than happy for me, or when I bought my car with money I'd saved from working 2 part-time jobs, and she'd commented that it was a starter car compared to the one Travis had bought her, or maybe it went back further to childhood dynamics I'd been too young to recognize as unhealthy. My phone buzzed with a message from Lawrence Meadows. Final payment cleared. Case officially resolved. You did good standing up for yourself. Most people wouldn't have. I stared at the message for a long time. The case was resolved, but nothing felt finished. I had my apartment back. The damages were repaired and Emily had paid what she owed, but the emotional aftermath remained unresolved, hanging in the air like humidity before a storm. Christmas came and went. My parents sent a generic card with both their names printed at the bottom. Emily posted photos on Facebook of herself at what appeared to be a beach resort, smiling widely with a drink in her hand, and a caption about new beginnings and leaving toxic people behind. I screenshotted the post and added it to my documentation folder, though I wasn't sure why. The legal case was over, but some part of me wanted evidence that this had all really happened, that I hadn't imagined the entire thing. But my apartment was mine. Every morning I woke up in a space I created, protected, and fought for. The walls were the color I'd chosen. The furniture was arranged exactly how I wanted it. The coffee table bore no wine stains, only the books I'd been meaning to read, and the plants I kept forgetting to water. 6 months after the incident, around mid-September, I ran into Travis, Emily's ex-husband, at a coffee shop downtown. He was with a woman I didn't recognize, both of them laughing at something on his phone. "Megan," he said, spotting me in line. "How have you been?" "Good. Really good, actually. This is Andrea." "Andrea, this is Emily's sister." Andrea smiled warmly. Travis seemed genuinely happy, lighter somehow than I remembered from family gatherings where he'd always looked vaguely stressed. "I heard about what happened with the apartment," Travis said. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry Emily put you through that. She has this way of assuming everyone will just accommodate her no matter what. I spent 7 years trying to make that work before I realized it was never going to change. The divorce is final then. Finalized last week, actually. Best decision I ever made, honestly. Turns out I'm a lot happier when I'm not constantly being told I'm not doing enough, earning enough, or being enough. I thought about my sister, about the way she'd always seemed dissatisfied no matter what she had. The bigger house was never big enough. The nicer car still had something wrong with it. Other people's vacations looked more exciting than hers. Other people's husbands were more attentive, more successful, more present. I hope she finds what she's looking for, I said, meaning it. I hope she figures out it's not something someone else can give her, Travis replied. I got my coffee and went home to my apartment. The space felt peaceful in the afternoon light. I'd hung new curtains the previous weekend, white fabric that filtered the sunlight into something soft and golden. The hardwood floors gleamed. The kitchen smelled like the lemon cleaning solution I preferred. This was mine. Not because someone had given it to me, not because I'd taken it from anyone else, but because I'd worked for it, invested in it, and protected it when protection became necessary. My phone buzzed. A message from Jennifer asking if I wanted to come to her place for dinner. Her boyfriend was grilling and she'd made too much potato salad. I accepted the invitation and grabbed a bottle of wine from the cabinet, making sure to use a coaster under my glass before leaving. The elevator worked for once. I rode down 4 floors thinking about boundaries and family, and the difference between loving someone and letting them hurt you. The conclusions I reached weren't particularly comforting, but they felt true in a way that mattered. Outside, the city moved around me with its usual chaos. People rushed to catch buses, walked dogs, carried groceries, argued on phones, laughed with friends. Somewhere in the city, my sister was living her life. Somewhere else, my parents were probably having dinner and wondering where things had gone wrong with their youngest daughter. I walked toward Jennifer's apartment, the wine bottle swinging gently in my canvas bag. The evening air felt cool and clean. Tomorrow I'd wake up in my own bed, make coffee in my own kitchen, and get ready for work in my own bathroom with its new mirror that reflected everything clearly without any cracks distorting the view. That felt like enough. More than enough, actually. It felt like everything I'd been working toward without quite realizing it until someone had tried to take it away. Some lessons arrive wrapped in anger and hurt delivered by the people we're supposed to trust most. Those lessons cost more than others, but they teach us things we can't learn any other way. I thought about the version of myself who'd stood in that hallway a month ago, key refusing to turn in the lock, calling my mother with confusion and rising panic. She felt like a different person now, not harder exactly, but clearer about where she ended, and other people began clear about what she deserved and what she refused to accept. The boundary between family and doormat had always existed. I just finally learned where to draw the line.